Welcome to Conversations with Great Minds. I'm Greg Lindner, President of the Americas at GfK and Chairman of the MRI Simmons joint venture. GfK MRI Simmons is also the proud sponsor of today's program. The ARF Great Mind Awards was established in 2006 to honor and celebrate leaders across the advertising and marketing research industry. Let's start with a congratulations to all this year's winners. In addition to today's program, winners will be featured at various ARF events and showcased throughout different ARF communities and published content. Today's program spotlights two Great Mind Award winners in separate interviews. We'll begin with Martin Renaud, EVP and Chief Marketing and Sales Officer at Mondelēz and winner of the CMO Award, interviewed by Lucia Moses, Deputy Editor at Business Insider, and that'll be followed by the Erwin Ephron Demystification Award winner, Dr. Duane Varan, CEO at MediaScience, interviewed by Brian Steinberg, Senior TV Editor at Variety. The CMO Award honors a C-suite marketing leader who has embraced research, insights, and data analytics to drive growth, brand value, and better consumer experience. Martin is successfully leading his organization to become more data-driven. This is tied to a heavy focus on consumer shopper data and a greater investment on digital marketing and online commerce. Under Martin's leadership, Mondelēz has invested heavily in marketing mix modeling, enabling an always-on approach to measuring ROI. With expanded coverage, a mix of in-house and outsourced modeling, and strong wiring between insights and analytics, media and marketing, the team has delivered a 25% improvement in working media ROI over the last 3 years, earning Mondelēz top-tier status based on Nielsen CPG benchmarks and unlocking sustained media investment. Prior to joining the company, Martin held a variety of roles, increasing in responsibility at Danone. Most recently, he served as President, Fresh Dairy Europe, after working as Vice President, Danone Waters Asia Pacific. It's my honor to congratulate and welcome Martin Renaud, winner of the 2022 CMO Award, and Business Insider's Lucia Moses.
Martin, thanks for spending time with me, and congratulations on your award. That's very exciting.
Thank you, Lucia. Nice to see you. Nice to meet you.
And you as well. So let's get started. You run marketing for one of the biggest CPG companies with some of the most famous brands and most loved brands. What's challenging about that, and what are the advantages in today's world of having such a portfolio of brands?
Yeah, I'm really honored and happy to be leading marketing at Mondelēz International. As you mentioned, we have unbelievable brands all over the world. Oreo, Sour Patch Kids, LU in France, Cadbury, Milka, amazing brands. And we have also amazing teams around the world working with those brands. So it's really, it's a pleasure. I wouldn't start to say it's a challenge, but definitely marketing is a world which is changing fast. Digital is changing a lot of things. And for me, it's kind of exciting, you know? So that's why I like what I do so much.
So as your award notes, data has been a big cornerstone of your marketing strategy. Start from the beginning of that transformation and describe or help us, I guess, understand how dramatic of a change that was.
So we started our transformation around 4 years ago when the company changed strategy and really decided to go back to a growth strategy. And the first point was really to put the consumer back at the center of all what we were doing in marketing and in the company overall. So we have dramatically accelerated a few things. First, we kind of declared a new philosophy for marketing at Mondelēz, which is called humaning, which is really to remind us that all what we do should be really to help connect with the consumers. And really what is important for me is this balance between art and science. We need data. This is a science part, but we need an art to transform this data in real insights and real and defining the right actions. No, so we have 4 pillars in our transformation. The first one is about leading with purpose, which is to really have very strong strategies for our brands in terms of positioning, in terms of growth strategy, in terms of portfolio strategy, for example. The second one is about making our products right. So making sure that daily we have the best quality, we have the best products, but also that we are developing incremental innovation. The third one is about craft creativity. So it's all about making the right assets, advertising for our consumers in a digital world. And here, personalization is a big priority for us. And finally, is about humanizing data, which is 2 angles, I would say. One is really elevating our insights and analytics through more data and leveraging the capabilities of analytics. And the second one is developing more one-on-one relationship with our consumers and developing e-commerce. And in all of those, really, insights and data is absolutely critical. So I really try to push a company where on one side, we are very much data-driven in all the decisions we take, but always reminding that we do that for the consumer and make sure we also add the soft skills around those data.
So help us appreciate how different that was from the way you were marketing your products before. What, if you could, can you think of an example of how you would have marketed, say, a Ritz before, and what changed under that new approach?
I mean, the starting point was good. No, Mondelēz is a very strong company. I said it, we have very strong brands, we have amazing products. So it's not like we were starting from a low base, but I think the mindset is always from a very good situation, how do we get to excellence? No, how do we push the boundaries? No, so if our product looks good and is good already, how do we make it even better in terms of taste, in terms of answering certain needs, in terms of well-being, for example? If we have, we, for example, did a big journey in improving our advertising. We were quite good with advertising, but we have been totally redesigning the way we were testing advertising and defining new standards of excellence and pushing everyone to get to the standards. And we have seen our KPIs on quality of advertising and effectiveness really grow. And at the end, our ROI, our return on investment, has been also very much growing. So I think it's taking the subjects, product quality, advertising, to name just 2, and then understand where we are, and then see what can be the ambition and how do we drive to this level of excellence. Right. Obviously, the end game being to drive the penetration of our brands, to grow our share of markets and the love for our brands.
Right. And along the way, you have made a big push into e-commerce. Talk about that journey and how the pandemic has played into that.
Yeah, so e-commerce obviously is a key priority. I mentioned it just before. It was already a priority before COVID, but it exploded and boomed very much. It's around 7% of our sales, 6 to 7% now. We have a big ambition to grow to around 20% at some point. And what we are really trying to do now is really making it more central in everything we do with our consumers. So, and I think a big thing is during the beginning of the journey, probably we had the e-commerce teams working a little bit more in silo. Now we are really trying to integrate much more so that we take in account e-commerce much earlier in our advertising and marketing plans. And also that all the brands are really thinking, okay, what do I need in terms of product packaging to really serve this channel, which is critical. So, and that's really exciting, no? But it's a new capability for many of our marketers. So we are working hard on this.
When I think of your products, I think of them as something I buy at the grocery store, maybe at the checkout. Maybe it's an impulse buy. how do you train the consumer to think of that as something they should buy online, something they should make it part of a planned purchase?
I mean, it depends because e-commerce now has become quite complex too, with different sub-channels of e-commerce. No, so if you take brick and mortars and more the regular e-commerce from the shops that you know, it will be in their list. So maybe the point is to help them not forget and remind them, hey, did you buy your Oreos this month? This is one. But on other channels, it's about, for example, do bundles with other products. If you buy a drink, why don't you buy your snack at the same time? Or if we go more direct to consumer, we have, we believe, a big opportunity with gifting, with chocolates in particular, but also with biscuits. So we are really trying to adapt our offers and the way we help consumers to convert to buy in function of where they buy within e-commerce.
Right, and that must that must really vary because there are so many different places that people can buy these products.
Yeah. So the point is to understand really the motivations of the shopper in this particular moment, in this particular customer, and really try to be fit for purpose at this moment. So this requires a lot of granularity. This requires a lot of understanding of the consumer and shopper.
Yes, and I imagine replicating that kind of surprise and serendipitous nature of buying snacks is hard to do online, isn't it?
Well, our sales are growing fast in online, and I think it's not tough. It's just we need to understand what are the shopper motivations, what are the consumer needs at that moment, and really having the right message online at that moment of time. No? So it's really about that's where data and insights are so important now to get to that granularity and have the right action plan.
So you have made this big transformation in terms of putting data and analytics at the forefront of your marketing. Are you where you want to be, or do you feel like there's a
I'm super proud of the journey we have made, and for me this recognition is not my recognition, it's really the recognition of all the teams of Mondelēz around the world in insights and analytics and in more largely marketing and sales. But the journey is long and will never stop. No, so I am always thinking, okay, what's next? And I think what is exciting, you arrive to a certain level, you are proud of that, but then you already see, okay, what will be the next step? So and that's what is driving me now, always dreaming for bigger ambitions and going there with the teams.
And right now it's not immediate, but everybody's talking about how around the corner the targeting cookie is going to go away. Google is going to phase that out. It's going to be some people say it's going to be, very dramatic. It's going to be the end of the world for marketers. How do you see it, and how
we already took that in account quite a lot in the way we build our media plans in paid media. But having said that, this is also generating some reflection, in particular to accelerate first-party data, obviously. No, so it's not only linked to cookies, but I think developing more direct relationships with our consumers is really a very important topic for us. As you mentioned a bit for snack and impulse, it's not so obvious how we really get to leverage that data, but we are working a lot, and we start to discover very interesting areas for us to push and to really both increase our connection with the consumers and our equity with them, but at the same time also to drive sales. No? So we work a lot on personalization of media. We have already proven that when we personalize the ROI of that media increases by 30% when we do that well. So that's really a great opportunity for us to be more impactful in terms of effectiveness of our advertising. But we discover new areas like, for example, CRM, which is something which probably in FMCG or at least in snacks was not so evident, but we discovered, yes, that can work too. No, so I think we have not waited to have all these communications about cookies disappearing. We have a big plan in place for that, but it's pushing us to new boundaries, which is great.
Companies like yours, as you said, have to collect first-party data on customers, which has not been a core competency for everybody. What have you found is the most successful way to do that?
Yeah, we are still learning, no, and I think actually everybody's learning, so I don't feel particularly bad. I think we are moving at the right path, but for me, what is really critical is discipline, no. Assuming that it's a new area for us and that we need really to start building the right foundation, test and learn before going too big. No, so what we are really trying to do is align the vocabulary, defining in particular the nomenclature and how are we going to organize that data, then being very clear about what are the use cases that we want to prove to leverage that data, test things, if it learns, go a bit bigger, and then go to more business units, more countries. So I think discipline to really learn is the point. And speed is important, but I think rigor is even more important.
Yeah, a lot of marketers talk about how, yeah, you need, if you want to get data from people, you have to give them some kind of benefit,
Yeah. I mean, the point for us is getting data. We get a lot of data. Our brands are very, very well known and people love them. So they are eager to interact with it. The point is, what do we do with that data? No, and that's more the question at this stage.
Well, let's in the time we have left, let's talk about what's going on in the world now. The pandemic isn't over clearly, but people are coming out more, going out and traveling more, spending more time outside. What is the state of play right now? How are you seeing that reflected in how people are buying your products? So I'm sure they were buying tons of snacks when they were in lockdown. What are you seeing right now?
Yeah, it's a complex world, definitively, which requires a lot of agility. The good news is that we still see very high consumption of snacks. It was true during COVID. You mentioned it because consumption at home was higher, but we may have some changes between categories or between channels, but it's remaining quite high. I think the big new thing at the moment is about inflation linked to the ingredients cost. So that's adding, more pressure. But so far, elasticities have been lower than what we have experienced in the past. So we are going step by step, but so far so good. And I think it's important to be able to adapt where we put our priorities, adapt how we communicate to our consumers. But as long as we do that well, we are confident we will navigate those times, which are very different. And each year is kind of a new surprise, no? But again, consumers are very strongly attached to their snacks and in particular to their brands. So far, so good again.
And what, from what you can see right now, what behaviors or habits do you think have you seen emerge in the pandemic that you think will last after things get more?
Yeah, I think we mentioned already the biggest one. I think e-commerce was boosted and is here to stay. And then I think consumers are still, willing to do both, indulge themselves. So indulgence is still very important, but at the same time, well-being is important. So how do they manage both? And I think, and we need to answer both very well. No, so these are the two big things I would say.
And finally, what changes in the way you market your products do you think will endure after the pandemic eases, if it eases more?
it's not so much linked to the pandemic, but I think the acceleration of digital in the way we connect with the consumers is the big thing we need to do well now. So we have increased dramatically our investment in advertising, in particular in digital. How do we have the right assets? I mentioned it. How do we personalize more to get more effectiveness? Is the point. How do we connect more individually for our consumers? That's a big change, no? So it started a few years ago, but if you think about how I started marketing, I was doing a TV film, and it was 4 months of my year, and that was a big thing of my year. Now you need to produce hundreds of assets per month. So that's a big change, I think. What doesn't change is the need to get to propose excellent products to the consumer, great taste, with the right nutritionals, with the right packaging, adapted for the channel. So I think there are things that are changing a lot, but there are things that will stay. And I think it's important to always remind that. Now, at the end of the day, we are here to offer great snacks and great products for our consumers. So I'm trying to keep those balanced.
Absolutely, that makes a lot of sense. Well, Martin, thank you once again, and congratulations.
Thank you, Lucia, and thanks for the ARF for this honor. And again, it's a big honor for my team and for Mondelēz in general. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Martin and Lucia. And congratulations again, Martin. It's very exciting. So I'm Al Sylvester. I'm a partner at Sequin Partners, and I'm last year's Erwin Ephron Demystification Award winner. Yay! It's so exciting. I'm here to introduce the next segment of today's event and tell you more about this award and what it means and why it's so important. For those of you who don't know Erwin, he really was quite a guy. He was a demystifier. And what I mean by that is he was a translator. He was a whittler downer of really complicated media topics. I found a great quote about Michelangelo, who said he saw the angel in the marble and carved until he set him free. And I think that's kind of what this Erwin Ephron Demystification Award is all about, cutting to the very essence of a topic and leaving out, what's unnecessary. And that's an important lesson in today's world. It's such an unbelievably complex marketing and media world that I think it's important to keep in mind. Erwin had a brilliant mind and loved our business. He was a scholar always, and he really could understand complex media and research concepts and present them very simply and eloquently in a way that stuck. I mean, we're still talking about Erwin years later. He was an amazing communicator, but more importantly, all of his work was grounded in really practical applications. And another important feature of Erwin's work that I hope we keep in mind is that he had this rare ability to express media concept in human terms. There were people in media in Erwin's mind, and we can forget people pretty easily when we start thinking about all the numbers. And he's still known to this day for advancing a couple of concepts like recency and using his favorite weird word of all time, propinquity, to describe the impact of an ad in close proximity to a consumer's need. So after a lengthy review process and a lot of conversation with the Ephron Award Committee, it was clear that Duane Varan was a fitting winner for the 2022 award. Thinking about what this award symbolizes and the accomplishments that it embodies, we thought a lot about what Duane has brought to the table in his career, and the decision became relatively easy. He has advanced many complicated topics in very human terms. Duane is also keeping humanity in our media world. And so now I want to congratulate Duane. It's awesome. I'm proud of you. And I want to welcome Scott McDonald, President and CEO of the ARF, to say a few words about Duane. Congratulations, Duane. Couldn't be happier.
Thank you, Alice. So why was Duane selected as this year's winner? I'll tell you. It has to do with the nature of the award itself. The Erwin Ephron Demystification Award is unique in that it honors those who've done research or interpreted research that helps to shine a light on some of the darker corners of our profession. Erwin Ephron himself was something of a fox, a rascally character who liked to question conventional wisdom, who provoked us to think about media, marketing, and advertising in new ways, and who articulated his thoughts widely in the industry, both in his writing and in his public utterances. And though there were many other excellent candidates for this award this year, the jury felt that these Ephron-esque qualities described Duane Varan to a T. Throughout his career, Duane has challenged the industry to embrace measurement innovation, but not to forget the basic tenets of science: the need for transparency, replicability, peer review, and validation. Duane first came to my attention through his work applying neuroscience tools to the development and evaluation of television content, work that made its way not only onto ARF stages, but also into peer-reviewed academic journals. He's been a frequent and oft-cited contributor to the Journal of Advertising Research, as well as to other publications, both academic and general. His involvement a decade ago with the ARF Neurostandards 1 study helped to clarify industry understanding of tools for studying cognition, memory, and emotion in media. And like any good scientist, he tries to develop a body of theory that can help us to explain our world, and he contrives experiments to test those theories and see if they can be confirmed with rigor and consistency. But unlike most scientists, he's also very gifted at communicating ideas and connecting them to practical business applications. So it is this rare combination of science and art that makes Duane so deserving of the 2022 Erwin Ephron Demystification Awards. So I'm honored now to welcome Brian Steinberg from Variety and Dr. Duane Varan, the 2022 Erwin Ephron Demystification Award winner. Congratulations again, Duane.
Thanks so much, Scott. We're here with Duane Varan of MediaScience and of many other accomplishments. He is the winner of this year's Erwin Ephron Demystification Award. Congratulations, Duane. Good to have you here.
Thanks, Brian, and thanks for joining us today with us too.
Absolutely. I thought the first thing we could talk about is innovation. I know over the years you have studied many different ad formats, the way they work, the way people pay attention to them. What is it you think you've learned? What kind of cracks of code? What things seem to gain traction, especially now when people have so much more choice over whether they watch a commercial or not?
Yeah, I think the industry used to be one where the pace of innovation was about once per decade. Black and white to color, the rise of cable TV, VCRs and DVR, and even that was too fast for the industry. The industry couldn't cope with that. It took us more than 10 years to come to terms with cable or VCRs. But, now I think innovation is perpetual. Every year, there's major shifts in our landscape that occur right now. And I think the reason that's important is because if tomorrow looks like yesterday, the name of the game is efficiency. If you get better and better at what you did yesterday, you're going to be better and better positioned for what you're going to do tomorrow. But when tomorrow doesn't look like yesterday, some bits do, some bits don't. So at the core of that need now, above all, is innovation. And so no matter where you sit in the value chain, innovation has to be the core of what you do. This is a challenge for research suppliers just as much as it is for anybody else. I mean, for example, the world is moving to connected TVs. I'm not a prophet in saying that, right? It's pretty self-evident that, connected TVs are here to stay and this is the future. But yet most research suppliers, in fact, almost all research suppliers are still testing connected TV propositions on desktops. How does that make any sense? Or even worse, on mobile phones. So, we have as much of an obligation to keep up with the pace of innovation as anybody else. And you're absolutely right. There are new formats that come every day. And the beauty of that for the brand and advertiser is that, we used to live in a world which was one size fits all. You had to fit your problem into the conventions of the 30-second ad. And not all advertisers were equally, predisposed to that. I mean, some were better at that. Some categories were better at that. But that was the game. Now, there's so much variety of choice out there that you can pick the format that actually best suits your communication objectives. And this is, I think, one of the nuances that's not in the market yet, where people are much more deliberate about the ways that they're using these formats rather than just responding to the pitches that they're getting. So you're absolutely right. It's an exciting time. There are a lot of exciting opportunities there. There's a plethora of different kinds of formats out there. They all have their unique mechanics. They all have their unique DNA. And that's why research around that is just so vital and so important.
Is there any one particular execution that you think you were kind of first to discover that this is going to do it? This is the one that's going to make everything different?
There's probably over 100 formats that we've tested over the years. And one of the ones that does best, that's very simple, but which is not yet really all that common in our industry. Now, we first tested this model like 20 years ago. Like it's been around the block, but nobody's really doing it. It's what we call a telescopic ad, where you click on an ad and you go to long form content for that ad. So you see an ad, you click on it, you go to something longer. The reason I think that's so critical at this juncture is because shorter and shorter ads are becoming, the convention. And that's not a bad thing. That's that you can have very effective short ads, but there's an opportunity there to use the short ad as the invitation, as the tease to pull you into something longer. So telescopic, I think, is the format which holds the greatest potential, which has not yet really been widely deployed in the industry. That's pretty interesting. Kind of that has been around for a little while, and people do try and do things, see where people can, use a QR code or that kind of thing to jump to something else. It's interesting kind of format. And one of the questions we always have to ask is whether our format is the chicken or the egg. And what I mean by that is what we are doing finding the people who are already going to buy our product, or is there a genuine persuasion effect at work? And we did some great work a while ago looking at econometric modeling of that question. And we demonstrated that the telescopic ad format in particular was actually doing genuine persuasion. So that's one of the reasons why it's such a great model. It's not just kind of like sifting and finding people. It's actually persuading people. If you see a feature in a car in a commercial, it just kind of like zooms by. You don't even know what the feature is. But if you have the opportunity to understand it more, you're much more likely to be interested in terms of, purchasing the product, et cetera. So that's why I think that format is particularly well suited. Yeah, very interesting. One thing I want to hit on a lot is the idea of attention. We're in an era where we're seeing all kinds of moves to new kinds of measures. People are looking at Nielsen, but they're also looking at 10 other vendors. You've seen a lot of the TV networks branch out this year in the upfront, offering a lot of new ways of slicing up audience. I think a lot of them try to get at the concept of who's watching what. And I wonder if you could talk a little bit about, the idea of new currencies emerging and the idea of maybe even attention itself, someone's time engagement or time spent with becoming more of a currency, more of a solid piece of negotiations for ad dollars. Yeah, there's no question attention is the new pink. And that's a good thing. The focus on attention is actually really great. I think, unfortunately, the discourse around attention is poorly informed. And what I mean by that is the basis for our discussion on attention should be the scientific literature on attention. And much of the debate that we're having is not grounded in the science of attention. It's grounded in things that suppliers want to bring to the market. That's the wrong way for us to be talking about attention. And there's a lot of myths, I think, around this dialogue right now. I'll highlight just a few of these, Brian, to illustrate what I mean. The first myth is that we should be interested in attention. As advertisers, we shouldn't be interested in attention. We should be interested in inattention. And it doesn't sound like a difference. In fact, we define attention at MediaScience. We define attention as the absence of inattention. And the reason it's such a big deal, we did this big study with, MediaScience and Ehrenberg Bass for Google, where we looked at every major approach to measuring for attention in the academic literature. So this includes very complex measures like pupil dilation, right? I mean, all kinds of different measures around how do you measure for attention? What's best in class? And one of the things we discovered in that is that a lot of these measures correlate very highly when it comes to what is inattention. So inattention is a stable construct, but very few of the measures actually correlate when you're talking about what attention is. And the reason they don't correlate is because there's not one kind of attention. There's very different kinds of attention. And so this is the first kind of myth that we understand. We think that we can get at attention. We can't. It's too big an ask at this stage. We just need to focus on inattention. The second myth is that more attention is better. We've long known that's not to be the case. We long have known that very low levels of attention for some ads are actually more effective than high levels of attention. And this is, again, where we misunderstand attention. Attention is a threshold. If you don't have it, you've got a barrier to the ad having any effect. But once you have it, it's about a whole bunch of other things that you have to then. So attention is one hoop among many hoops that we have to jump through. But I think the biggest concern that I have is the new rise of what we would call synthetic measures of attention, which are these AI-based measures. This is really problematic on a lot of levels, but the biggest issue that I have with it is, where's the proof? Where is the independent validation? You can't have vendors grading their own homework here, right? You have to have proper independent validation against a proper ground truth. A lot of the measures that people are using in deriving that have nothing to do with attention. For example, sales lift. Sales lift goes into their model. Well, sales lift has nothing to do with it. It's true that if you have good sales, you have attention, but that doesn't mean that you can't have attention without the sales lift. And a model like that is going to penalize ads that deliver very well on attention, but just fail on all the other hoops. So there's a lot of, it's way too premature to be talking about this as currency. Right now, we should be talking about proper validation, independent validation of what these measures claim to do. Are we really measuring attention, or are we measuring something else? Or maybe nothing else. Maybe it's just a nothing measure.
I know this is the big debate in the industry right now. This everyone's talking about how to figure out measure audiences in different ways. I know this is stuff that people are really kind of trying to get their heads around. So it's a big topic.
Absolutely, it's a good discussion to have,
yeah.
But it's premature for us to be, talking about deploying it in the ways that we're talking about it right now.
Yeah.
Too many people are drinking the Kool-Aid, Brian.
Another thing I know you study a lot is the idea of media environments. I know that in a different time, people had one. They watch a big screen. Now they can watch in a lean back mode, more of a lean forward mode. Certain things, certain shows correlate more to those different behaviors. What are you learning about how a media environment affects engagement and attention and someone's recollection of what they see on the screen?
Yeah, and of course, with the demise of the cookie, this becomes more important than ever. And we're bifurcating in terms of how we buy around programmatic and premium has to mean context in some way. So increasingly, it's going to be critical that we demonstrate the value. I think the biggest problem that we have in context is that we simplify it. We're too simplistic in the way we think about it. Like usually we're talking about something like congruity, funny ads and in funny shows. And that is an effect. There's no question about it. I mean, when you go into a funny show and then you go into the ad, you've warmed up the audience. I mean, much the way that like a stand-up comic will have somebody come in and warm the audience up before, because they're going to be more receptive to the jokes. So very clearly congruity is an effect, but it's just one of many different kinds of context effects. In fact, we've demonstrated over 10 different types of contextual transfer that work. And the reason it's important is the mechanics of how they work are all very, very different from one another. So for example, we've long demonstrated that news, contrary to, popular opinion, news is a superior environment. It's true, it's negative, but what happens with news is news activates your cognitive resources. You're thinking when you're watching the news, and you go into the ad environment with better access to your cognitive functions. So as a consequence, your memory pathways are significantly improved. So what we see with news is often a superior effect in terms of ad memory. So that's the mechanics of how news works. That's very different to sports.
Yeah.
Sports is about excitation transfer. You're really excited. You perceive the brand in that more excited state. And so the primary driver of the effect for sports is actually brand attitude and a change in how you perceive the brand. So very different mechanics. And this is the reason why it's so important for us to understand kind of each of these different kinds of contextual transfer effects, so that where ultimately brands want to be positioned is where they're turning to the right context relative to their very specific communication objectives. So if my objective is about memory, oh, look, news is great for memory. That's where I should go for memory. So these are the kinds of challenges I think that we face in the road ahead.
That's really interesting stuff. And you probably can find a different result for every genre and topic and different kind of show. That's a
Absolutely,
big, yeah.
absolutely. Environment's critical.
Yeah, yeah. Now, I know over the years, you mentioned this before about pupil dilation. I know that one of the things you look at sometimes are people's biological reactions to commercials and TV shows and different things they see on the screen. This is, I think, a difficult practice to people get their heads around. Where do you think neuroscience, in some sense, where do you think things are with this? And do you think it's at a level where people are trusting it?
Well, you know, the neuromarketing, the ARF has done a great job. I mean, Neurostandards 1.0, you know, was a real change in dialogue. It was, look, let's create a common discourse around what questions people should be asking about whether these tools are legit. There is no doubt that there is a need for the neuromarketing tools in the marketplace. And the reason is that when we're talking about, you know, programs or ads, above all, we're talking about human emotion. We are interested in the journey of the consumer, of the viewer, and particularly in terms of their emotional journey. And the problem we have is this: people lack access to their own emotional journeys. So anytime you ask a person a question about how they feel about something, they're giving you the rational interpretation of what they think they must be feeling, which is actually not the same thing. It's actually very different. And so it's critical that we measure for emotion directly rather than indirectly. And that's what these newer tools allow. But just because you use a scientific tool doesn't make what you do good science. And the problem that we have as an industry is every day there's a new vendor in the market who thinks they can just use the tool and claim it as science, when in actual fact, you need the same, I mean, it's the same discussion we had about attention. You need proper validation, you need proper scientific method. I mean, there is a dialogue and a discourse around what that looks like. And so that's the need. There is still that need for good, proper, you know, science to make these tools, you know, weave the magic that they do. Great tools, great possibilities, but only if they're actually used properly.
Last thing I want to hit you with is, I think, an age-old question in the world of advertising, especially over the last decade or so. We always hear addressability is the holy grail of business. It's in, you know, Pampers ads to mothers who are expecting, car ads, people who would market for a new car, dog food to people who own dogs. But is this how are we getting closer, farther? When do you think this actually becomes a more scalable technology that we're going to see at use more regularly?
I think the problem's not the scalability of it. I think the problems is that we don't get the fundamentals of it right. There's a lot of nuance to getting it right. And let me explain some of the things that I mean by that. So first and foremost, you know, our research shows that category relevance, which is often what we're talking about here. It doesn't have to be. I mean, we can talk about addressability in a lot of ways, but usually people are talking about it in terms of, you know, dog food for dog owners, like category relevance, right? Category relevance in our research only accounts for about 10% of the effect of an ad. 66% of the effect of the ad is the ad creative. So let's start here. If we want to be obsessed with one thing, what we should be obsessed with is ad creative. That's where the lion's share of our effect is. Now, if addressability means that instead of producing one $500,000, you know, super production ad that emotionally really moves you in some way, right? And instead of that, we're now going to produce 10 $50,000 ads. Well, that's a losing proposition. 10 crappy ads, you know, even if they deliver that 10% of relevance, is not going to be a substitute for what the 66% of a good creative ad is going to deliver. So that's the first thing. The second thing is the nuance of it is really very complex. We did a study where we demonstrated that in 30 days, 50% of what people are in market for has already changed. Now, it turns out that people are very stable when it comes to what they're not in market for. So if I change that question and say, what are you not in market for? That's 88% in 30 days. So that's pretty good. But if we're very fickle with what we want and what we like. And that means that if the data that informed our model is more than 30 days old, and in some cases, I mean, it's years old,
Yeah.
right? Then it's going to be a lot harder to deliver to that target. So addressability holds promise, but the promise, I think, in the market is exaggerated, and people should be using it in very deliberate ways, and it should go beyond category. It should go beyond category relevance. So, one of the things that we found, for example, with dogs and dog food, you may identify with an ad with a dog, but it probably has to be a dog like your dog. Like, I had Labradors, and if I saw a Labrador, maybe I'd respond to a Labrador, but that doesn't mean I'm going to respond to a Bulldog. So there's a lot of nuance to getting it right. And, again, when we tested a whole bunch of different addressable models, what we found was the most effective way of doing addressability? It was frequency capping. Something super, super, super simple to do.
Yeah.
A win for the media buyer, a win for the viewer. Everybody loves frequency capping. So, that's the kind of dialogue I think we should be having, is let's get some of the fundamentals right. Now, it could work if what you're looking for is efficiency, but if you think it's going to be more effective, that's a harder proposition to deliver on.
Before I let you go, one last, just looking to the future a little bit. If you had to predict the next big challenge in getting people to sit still and watch something, what do you think it is, given just the plethora of screens and behaviors we're now trying to grapple with?
This reminds me of the 1960s, and the Children's Television Workshop came around and started discovering how to, with research, by the way, with great research, trying to figure out how to do TV shows for kids. And one of the things they learned is, that it should be shorter duration. So you should have optimally 20-second clips instead of what was at the time really long clips. And then they got criticized for that. They said, you have destroyed the entire system of education. Now kids are coming to class and they want things that are really short. You popularized the idea that content needs to be short. It's a change. I think that the changes are here. We're not going to put the genie back in the bottle. All we can do is figure out how to ebb and flow with it. And the key to that is understanding good research. There are parts of storytelling that are eternal, and there are parts that are not. And we need to understand which are which so that we're capitalizing on the enduring features of story, and we're adapting and responding to those which can be optimized. A lot of it comes back to attention and holding attention. That's going to be more and more challenging as we go into the future.
I agree. It's definitely a heady era we're getting into, and this is great stuff to talk about. Thanks for the time, and thanks for giving us a little bit of insight on all this. Thanks.
And thank you, Brian, for your continued excellence in journalism.
Wow, thank you. Wow, it's a mutual admiration society. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Brian and Duane and Alice and Scott. With that, we conclude today's program. Congratulations again to the winners, and thank you to our speakers, especially Martin and Duane, and to our interviewers for driving these conversations. Be sure to check out the ARF.org to see what's coming up next at the ARF, including Great Mind Awards winning content. And before you go, be sure to fill out the quick survey that will shortly appear. Have a great afternoon, and thank you.